This is the beginning of the book, and that sets the ground rules, sets the tempo, gives you the story. And this particular evening, as he had for 17 years as the Institute's janitor, 37-year-old Nicholas Stolarski rolled his trash barrel down empty hallways of a complex warren of classrooms and laboratories at Calumet Technical Institute, genially referred to by local pundits as Caltech East. Nick, as everyone called him, was later to recall that, yes, something about that evening was unusual. Students, instructors, and staff had left the premises, and the weather, while disagreeable, was an ordinary Chicago mix of late winter slush and sleet. Nick said what bothered him was a peculiar sound, an annoying screech of vibrating noises pulsating above the building's rooftop. He recalled that he climbed the fire escape and checked it out. Sure enough, he heard this weird racket, noticed an odd sort of bluish tint to the moisture in the air, but decided to ignore it since he didn't know what to make of it. In routine fashion, he had continued to sweep concrete floors, deposited the detritus in a trash barrel, and moved briskly to the third floor, a final section to be cleaned before he could unload the rubbish into industrial collection bins, stow his gear in the custodian's closet, hurry to his pickup in the deserted parking lot, and head toward his modest home on Pulaski Avenue, to his wife Marisa, to his 12-year-old son Andreas, and to Maria Magdalena, his adored 6-year-old daughter. Nick anticipated his customary stop at his neighborhood saloon, Doyle's Dugout, to share amiable fellowship, the warmth of familiar surroundings, and the pleasure of a sudsy draft or two. Everyone there enjoyed the company of the stocky, amiable, and gentle man with the blond crew cut, who bragged quietly about his family and his Polish heritage. Nick was not inquisitive by nature. He emptied wastebaskets, swept floors, and dusted untidy spaces in the Institute's bewildering maze of engines, appliances, instruments, and apparatus by rote, largely disinterested in their use or their relevance to his life. While he held no animosity toward computers, he lamented the careless waste of energy and taxpayer money when he entered the classrooms where banks of screens spewed ghostly pixels of Calumet's website and occasional pornographic images into an apathetic void. At Maurice's insistence, he had bought an inexpensive computer for Andreas, who quickly mastered its intricacies and even taught little Magdalena to surf the internet. He admired his son's enterprise, but had no interest in sharing it. When it came to baseball scores, truck maintenance, Windy City politics, and mysteries of the female mind, advice about raising children, almost anything worth knowing, he could always count on expertise freely dispensed at Doyle's. He occasionally played penny ante poker with guys in the neighborhood and went to bear games with them when he had a few extra bucks to spend. He had no intimate friends, but no real enemies either, except perhaps for his boss, Otto Schanzenbach, the Institute supervisor of building and maintenance, whom Nick regarded, covertly to be sure, as a fat-headed, arrogant, penny-pinching Hun. Aside from this unfortunate relationship, Nicholas Stolarski considered his life to be reasonably productive and orderly, devoid of undue idiosyncrasy, and precisely why he could not explain what possessed him that strange evening shortly after he rolled his trash barrel into the northern traverse on the third floor of the Calumet Technical Institute. On that critical occasion, Nick, as usual, had entered the experimental laboratory, a facility comprised of several adjoining classrooms whose dividing walls were long ago removed to create space for an expanding collection of bulky, expensive, and highly arcane paraphernalia. Although a few witless students occasionally snitched test tubes or harmless stuff from chem or liberated frog cadavers from the zoo lab, most of the school's facilities remained unlocked. However, the EEL, as the Experimental Electronic Laboratory was derisively called, was an entirely different proposition. The EEL provoked intense attention and remained locked 24/7. Innuendo circulated widely among incoming freshmen that weird robots, mind-altering ray guns, and assorted time warp machines were developed in there by Caltech nerds, a collection of unshaven, sallow-faced, bespectacled trolls who stonewalled all information concerning that slithery facility. Dr. Alex Frobisher, its first and only instructor, ran the place like a dictator and zealously guarded his domain. Most colleagues were convinced that Frobisher was a lapsed Krypton, an alien whose tufted eyebrows, galvanized fringe of red hair, and skeleton and jeans appearance did nothing to dispel such rumors. Dr. Frobisher's orders to the custodial staff, namely Nicholas Stolarski, were specific. Empty wastebaskets, sweep the floor, don't touch anything, get out, and lock the door, period. Until this singular evening, Nick had diligently obeyed that directive. In his rise to international notoriety, Nick's recall of that fateful event was shrouded in mental fog, a psychic gray area of rueful admissions that his actions, certainly counter to Dr. Frobisher's directive, were wholly irrational, propelled by an unexplainable, disorienting compulsion. Prodded by government officials, psychiatrists, military authorities, technocrats, publishers, literary agents, religious leaders, science groupies, and countless hangers-on, Nick's agent, Joey Mooney, always related his client's standard explanation. When I walked into the eel, I noticed right away that something was in the air. The same weird sound I checked out before was now also inside the lab. It was powerful, with a kind of electronic energy so forceful that it completely blew my mind and goaded me into an irresistible impulse to stop the noise by tampering with every gadget in the lab. My actions were totally irrational. I simply couldn't resist the urge to disconnect, then randomly reconnect strings of wires, twirl knobs, pull levers, and reverse positions of every switch on which I could lay my hands. Everything I touched made things worse. The sound screamed at me like something out of a horror picture and seemed to generate streaks of electronic current that bounced off the walls and surrounded me. I was totally terrified, lost my balance, and stumbled into a metallic chair-like contraption. To steady myself, I snatched the two flashing handles that protruded from a pair of armrests. An amazing thing happened. The electric swirls died down, the weird sound receded, and then stopped completely. There was complete silence in the laboratory, and it appeared to be absolutely normal again, except, of course, for all the damage I had done." Unquote. Nick added that he felt immensely relieved, euphoric, in fact, but also acutely anxious to get out of there, only dimly aware at the time of a biotic warmth that infused his lower body, crept slowly into his upper torso, and oozed like contractile fibers into both shoulders. He later ascribed his lack of perception regarding such sensations to the excitement of the moment, which, he resolutely maintained, also accounted for the puzzling fact that he suddenly found himself in the hallway, locking the eel's door, without the slightest idea of how he got there so fast.